Hello, my name is Bob Ganzak, and welcome to MotivationU, the podcast. Welcome to MotivationU, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, here inside Coach's Podcast Room at Celebration Point, Gainesville, Florida. My name is Bob Ganzak. My guest today, again, is a repeat offender, Ed Potts. Ed, we'll get into some of the things. I want to touch on some things that are going on in Dale Carnegie.
Okay, sure.
And share a thought with our audience today. First of all, if you have any questions, send them in on Facebook Live on a text, and we'll answer those. And the subject matter today is going to be fascinating, so it's all about leadership. But we do have some Dale Carnegie programs coming up, starting next Tuesday here in Gainesville. Dale Carnegie class, still have room in that. If you'd like to sign up, you can go to jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, and sign up. So that starts the 12th. We have a high-impact presentations. If you're a leader, if you want to be a leader, that storytelling, that ability to get in front of a crowd and really wow them, high-impact presentations is coming to Jacksonville. It's going to be at the Downtown Marriott, September 14th and 15th, all day, 2 days. It's an incredible, incredible event. Please, again, you can sign up at jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. Class is coming in Valdosta. Class is coming in October in Jacksonville. Just go there, take a look at it, and find that out. Last Friday, Labor Day weekend, it was absolutely crazy. I live up in Valdosta, and we went through the hurricane. The eye of the hurricane came right over us. Geez. The city of Valdosta is still not put back together. Still people without power, people without internet, and different things. So keep those folks in our thought. People in Cedar Key, Perry, Florida, individuals that were affected by that. But something happened Friday that really impacted my life. I found out about it Saturday morning. When I give a talk, I will admit I'm a little different. I like to have fun at what I do. If it's the podcast with Ed, we're here. I mean, this could be a suit and tie, stuffed shirt, very formatic type of podcast. That's not Bob Ganzak. That's not me. It never has been. At least since about 1975, 76, 77. We lost somebody that had a big impact on many of our lives, in Jimmy Buffett. Somebody once asked me back in the 90s on a radio broadcast that I was a part of, they said, what happened to all the poets? Where are the Emersons, the Dickinsons, the Robert Louis Stevenson, what happened to all those people? I said, they're still here. It's just that they have a guitar in their hands nowadays. If you took the music away and just read the words, that Calypso poet fascinating stuff. Read the book, Joe Merchant, or A Pirate Looks at 50, the story of his life at that stage. Absolutely incredible. And one of the things that Jimmy Buffett had brought to me as far as my mentality was, see, you can have fun doing what you do. You can be passionate about it. I mean, he enjoyed his craft. And he failed at so many darn things going through, tried to be a country music artist, and and it just didn't work. It didn't work. But he found a niche, believed in himself, and I'm sure when he looked at himself in the mirror every single morning, he didn't say, "You're never going to make it." He probably said, "I believe in you." And he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. So that was a real sad weekend to lose that individual. Though, he lived his life in a song, as he said. So we have those songs and those words to carry us on forward. And I'm never going to change the way I approach my job. I'm going to have a great time. If somebody tells me they don't want me there talking to them, hey, fine, that's your decision. But I'm not going to try to be somebody that I'm not to please somebody else. So, and that's one thing they taught me. That's it for my words on Jimmy Buffett. Ed Potts, welcome
Thank
to
you.
MotivationU, the podcast. Glad you are here again.
Happy to be back.
Now, Ed's background is he's a board member of the Ronald McDonald House, Charities of North Florida, North Central Florida, right? We had Sherry Houston on here a couple of weeks ago, your CEO.
Yeah.
Had a wonderful time. You're a financial advisor for Edward Jones. Is that a franchise that you own? Or?
No, it is very much set up the way the insurance business is. And if you are an agent with State Farm or Nationwide, they're your clients, but you don't own the business. So when you retire, you're going to get paid a departure fee of some kind, but those accounts will then go to whoever's taking over. So same at Jones. Matt Cerency has been in my office now for 3 years, and 1 month from now, it's my name comes off the door. It's his office. So
you're stepping out.
Yes. So
Is that retirement, or do you not like that word?
So I sold my insurance agency back in 2012, and I did a very poor job of retiring.
Okay.
I wasn't quite ready to be done, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. But the biggest thing that I had failed to do is to have a plan prior to that. All of a sudden, I'm not going to the office anymore, and so I go and see my friend John Spence is having a session a little bit later.
I was just going to mention John. That's another guy that's when he was here, it was almost like you can't retire when you never have a job. He's so passionate and loves what he does so much that it's like never worked a day in your life.
He is, and I watched him on your podcast. Well, John and I have been friends since I came to town because he and I both favor Brown's Country Buffet restaurant in Alachua. That's where I met him. Now, I'd read a lot of his stuff, and I recognized him, but he's just sitting by himself, minding his own business. And I said hi and said, I read a lot of your articles, and we got to know each other and become friends. So when I realized that Matt Cerency, he had been in my office probably a year longer than he would have been had the pandemic not come. So when the pandemic came about, Edward Jones put a halt on leasing new offices. So Matt he qualified for his office. He could have been out on his own, probably would have opened an office out in Hawthorne where he was the mayor at that time. And 4 generations, their family, the Cerency family, everybody knows them out there. And I just realized, Matt's a great fit for my office. So I talked to my wife and said, I think I'm going to ask Matt if he would stay. If he'll stay, I'll retire early, a little bit earlier than I would have otherwise. But I'm picking my successor versus having my successor chosen for me. And she said, that's great, but you need to talk to somebody this time before you retire. And so I called John and I said, hey, I need an hour of your professional time. I'm getting ready to think I'm going to retire, and I want to have a plan in place. And he goes, well, first of all, it's not going to take us an hour. And second of all, I'm not charging you. We'll figure this out. And so he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I definitely want a charitable bucket. I want a civic bucket. I want to be involved in my city where my office was in Alachua. I live in Alachua. We're going to continue to live in Alachua, where this is our forever home. And then family. We've got a large family. And then he took me through a series of questions. It's what he does, and he knows if I'm BSing, right? Yes. So we whittled it down, and when it came to charitable, he said, well, what would be your number one wish on the charitable side? I said, well, it's not even close. Ronald McDonald House, serving on the board of the Ronald McDonald House would be my number one retirement wish. And then there were some things business-wise I wanted to accomplish in that 2 years. And then the civic would be to, at some point, run for the city commission or be involved in leadership of our city in some way, shape, or form. And just, everything just like that. John probably had lunch with Sherry Houston, and not a week later, 2 weeks later, I get a call from Sherry,
knock, knock, knock.
And asking if I'd be willing to come onto the board. And then my friend Robert Wilford, who was commissioner in Alachua, so this is maybe 2 weeks later, had nothing to do. This one had nothing to do with John. Robert Wilford takes me to breakfast at Brown's. Everything in Alachua happens at Brown's.
I've got to go to
Buffet.
Brown's. I've not been there yet.
Yeah. And Robert said that he was not, in the best of health, and that he and his wife had decided they were going to move up to St. Augustine area to be closer to their children, and so he was not going to run for re-election. This is January of 2022, and the election's in April. So these were things that I wanted to do post Edward Jones.
Are you already in that role?
I was, yeah. So I'm not even 6 months into my just the transition, which takes 2 years at Edward Jones, and now I'm running for commission, and I'm on the board of the Ronald McDonald House. So John advanced my retirement activities. So I certainly I sent a note to somebody yesterday and said, retirement's not quite as peaceful as one might imagine. But I love, I know we're going to talk about the Ronald McDonald House, but everything that I had hoped it would be, it's 10 times better than that. I knew a number of the board members. Some of them I knew by reputation, some of them that I knew personally, but what a phenomenal group of folks. And I knew, he asked me why the Ronald McDonald House, and I said, because Sherry Houston is the best executive director of a non-for-profit I've ever met. And I've been on non-for-profit boards.
Remarkable person.
For
absolutely. Just you can feel it just being in the room. Yeah. I'm sure every single city and every community has those individuals. We are so blessed to have a John Spence and a Freddie Weavy in this town.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And it's one thing to get one of the two, or a quarter of one of the two, but to have two of them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's others. I don't know everybody in this town.
It's like having two franchise players. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! It's just two people that when you tap into, not only that, their openness to allow people to come in and ask questions. And I had one of my students go through a business situation recently, and I said, "You reach out to Freddie. Reach out to him. Just pick his brain. Just like you're on the couch, just talk and listen to what comes back at you." And it's amazing. John, it's so nice to have those type of people in this town. And they make things happen too.
Oh, yes.
That's the other part. John's been on this program twice, and I still remember his line the second time he came on. So you couldn't get somebody else on, huh? So you had to come back. No, I said, sorry, Freddie told me that, like, you didn't have any friends and you needed somebody to chat with. You know? But so the board of directors, you've opened up that can of worms at the Ronald McDonald Charities in North Central Florida. Who are some of the board members, and what is your mission? Like, when you get together for your board meetings, what is that like? Can you give a little like snippet to us what that leadership is like inside that room?
So Sherry is the heart of the house and the passion. But Sherry will tell you, she reports to the board. She'll always say she has 25 bosses, right? And who wants to work for more than one boss, right? But our board elects a chair, and the chair typically serves 2 years. Brian Nasworth, owner of Quality Plumbing. Brian is the current chair.
Wonderful man.
And
Wonderful man.
Bobby Robinson from R.E. Robinson Remodeling. Bobby will follow Brian starting in 2024. So at the end of the year, Brian finishes, and Bobby will serve her 2 terms. And the rest of the board is made up of very diverse backgrounds, folks with diverse backgrounds. I mean, you need that. You need different points of view. You've got Mike Potapow and Mike Stryker, who were both McDonald's franchisees. Mike owns a number of stores up in the Stark, Palatka area, and Mike's parents were McDonald's franchisees when he was a kid. And I believe they had Lake City in that area, and including Alachua store, the city of Alachua store. And his parents, like mine, had made the decision to sell their stores. And but the difference is Mike was old enough to stay in the business, versus I was young when my dad got sick, and so there was no option at that point. So Mike bought the Alachua store. So he had the one store, and his parents sold the rest of them. But Mike bought the store where the interstate exit empties into your parking lot at the intersection of I-75 and 441. Not a bad deal.
No, not a bad place.
In a great store. So Mike decided to sell his store a couple of years ago, and we had gotten to know each other. Number one, because I eat at McDonald's a lot, so I got to know him, and we talked about our families, both kind of growing up with McDonald's, and he didn't know anything about the Ray Kroc stuff. I'm very I get very excited about what my dad and my grandparents did, so I'll only talk about that in rare occasion. And then when I did your podcast and a podcast for my friend Ben Bukhari, well then. Now it's out there, so it's you might as well talk about it.
Sorry about that.
No. That I mean, I think post retirement, I look at it differently, and you talked about having fun. For me now, my life is I'm doing in retirement what I wanted to do. So I'm having fun, and I'm enjoying it.
And do it with your own personality too.
I want to surround myself with people who interest me, and I learn from them, and I have that in both of those opportunities. So the board, a diverse board, terrific folks. We meet as a board once a quarter, and the meetings are, there's no fluff. These are busy people. A lot of these are people who own their own businesses.
Is it like an hour long? Or?
Yeah. So we get most of the business done probably in an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Maybe for the last 18 months, it's been a little more because of the renovation and moving the house. Yep. But Sherry runs it very efficiently, and Brian in particular. Brian he has got it down. We could not possibly have had a better president in place to do this project.
Yeah.
The capital campaign was new to a lot of folks. I had been involved in capital campaigns before, either through our church in Indianapolis when I was director of finance, or other non-for-profits. But this was a much bigger undertaking, and I know there were a lot of people on our board that were very uncomfortable with having to ask people for money, because that's not what they had to do. With us, it's about events, and man, you can get excited and have fun, and all of our board members. You sign a letter of understanding when you become a board member at the Ronald McDonald House.
Wow.
And
so that letter is...
That letter is going to tell you the Ronald McDonald House Charities of North Central Florida is your #1 charity.
Okay.
Right? We expect you to be involved in events, help plan events, attend the events, sponsor the events. You are in. This is not a resume builder. This is work. Yep. And you need to have a passion for it. And I'll tell you, like many non-for-profits, if you haven't been involved, you haven't been to the house, you haven't come and cooked in our kitchen and interacted with the families, or come to one of our events, you don't really understand it until you've done that. And let's face it, it is not hard to create passion when you're taking care of families who have critically ill children, right? It is more of a challenge when you're dealing with things that are unpleasing to discuss, if it's domestic violence or those types of things.
Very tough.
So when you are trying to convince somebody to support our organization, and you don't already know what we do, when we talk about what our families are going through, it's just not a hard sell. But
that is a very big part of any non-for-profit. Yeah. I've served on a number of boards, and I think back of the ones that impacted me the most, and that we were able to impact the community. Things like junior achievement were wonderful. Salvation Army was wonderful. The YMCA was wonderful. But all of those boards that you sat on, but those ones that people got emotional about, which the Ronald McDonald House is that way. And it's just, man. You're blessed to be there.
And so every board meeting, every committee meeting as well, starts with what we call a mission moment. So if it's Sherry or one of the team members leading that meeting, the mission moment is generally going to be about a family, a great story where a kid had been waiting for 8 months to get a heart, and they've been in the house for sometimes 18 months. Depending on how quickly they find a heart, and then the rehab and everything else. And so the stories are amazing. Not every one ends the way we want, but you're dealing with critically ill children coming to one of the greatest children's hospitals in the country. So our families come from all over. And So if I can share Brian's story, and then you'll have to have Brian on. Brian will kill me for saying that, because
Brian is a graduate of Dale Carnegie, and this is a call out to you, Brian. You need to be on this program right here. We want to sit. I want you to tell everybody the same story you told me 14 years ago. That's
Brian will kill me for saying that, but he and I've told him this, that we were just so fortunate to have him leading us during this challenging time, and to get us through it. But his passion for the Ronald McDonald House came on a visit he made with Sherry. I know they're in Rotary together, and it may have been that connection. But he came into the house. She's touring him around, and he's joining the board, right? at that time. So he's like me, just coming onto the board. And they go into the laundry room as they're doing a tour, and there's a woman like down on her hands and knees pulling laundry out of the dryer, right? And he's looking at that going, we've got to do better than this. We can't have people down on their hands and knees, pulling laundry out. And so he bought all new appliances for the house.
Wow.
And made them,
up
to where they
stairs,
were
yeah.
up to where people could do this comfortably, because he understood these folks in many cases are at the hospital 12 hours a day. They come back for a break, but for the most part, they're living at the hospital. So when they come back to be down on your knees trying to do laundry is not what we wanted to have happen. And so Brian went from being a board member to being a board member, right? I mean, he is, and so many of our board member stories would be that same type of thing, an experience that they had, whether it was personal, where they had a family member. One of my wife's best friends, their daughter had a baby who was going to be born with heart issues and was going to need surgery. And they were able to stay, at the house. And I mean, the impact that has. And when I'll talk to people about serving on the board, and they'll tell me, we had a child that, and nobody really understands those families except somebody who's had their child in a critical care situation. And so the pandemic was a challenge for us. I mean, Sherry and the staff did such an amazing job. We were the only house in the state of Florida that remained open throughout the pandemic. But the protocols that had to be put in place, you can imagine, were very, very difficult. So if mom is there with the child, mom's going to have to stay with the child. There's no swapping off, because we couldn't have people going back home and getting COVID and then coming back to the house, because we have families that are already at risk, right? So the protocols were very, very difficult. Everybody had to be tested before they could come in, and then nobody could go home. And then the ability for the families to be able to have fellowship when they're eating and get to know each other, all of that was gone.
Restricted.
So during the pandemic, we couldn't have chefs come in, so we had to have food catered in. Folks were donating, which was wonderful, and the restaurants did a great job. But instead of ringing the dinner bell and having folks come down together, one family at a time would come down, get their stuff, and then take it back up to their room to eat.
Oh, my.
So one of the real benefits of our house is that those families have somebody else that they can talk to that can relate to what they're going through. Because those of us who've been blessed and not to have to be in that situation, we really can't.
And that was carved out. That was eliminated in your situation back then. That was
so now in the new house with 19 more rooms, we're now at 51 rooms, and they're suites. So we could have had more rooms if we made them smaller, but our families deserve, having as comfortable a situation as possible. So we go from, 32 rooms to, 50 rooms and suites, a kitchen that is incredible, beautiful commercial kitchen.
I saw the pictures. It was like, that is.
So our families, folks that have come in and cooked, if you've cooked at the current house, come and cook at the new house. It'll be a whole lot better experience.
We're talking with Ed Potts, a financial advisor for Edward Jones, board of director, member of the board of the Ronald McDonald Charities, the Ronald McDonald House in North Central Florida. We're going to grab a quick break, and then we're going to come back. This is Motivation U, the podcast.
Attention all Gator fans, Meldon Law is giving away a chance to experience the Florida-Georgia game like never before. 2-night stay at the Hilton on the River, dinner at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, 2 premium tickets to the game, and a football signed by Coach Billy Napier, and much more. Go to the Meldon Law Facebook page and look for the VIP experience for 2. Good luck and go Gators!
Jeffrey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm joining the band, of course. Since Meldon Law is the official law firm partner of the Florida Gators, I want to help.
Dad, we're litigators. Let's stick to helping people in the courtroom.
Well, can we still hang out and jam a little bit? At Meldon Law, we won't back down.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast room here at beautiful Celebration Point. I'm talking with Ed Potts. And Ed, we've talked about so many different things. You talked about Ronald McDonald House and you know, something that Sherry Houston mentioned to me, and it was, I don't think it was while we were on the podcast, I think it was off. She started talking about the siblings of those kids that are waiting for that heart for 18 months. And they've got younger brother or sister, and the emotional roller coaster that those little ones are on. I have nothing to say about that, but what a blessing to have a place like the Ronald McDonald House that is cognizant of those youngsters.
At our events, our big event, the Red Shoe Affair, which we just had 850 guests. It was our most successful Red Shoe ever, largest and most successful. And there's usually a video about a family. And imagine, not every family is going to be comfortable telling that story or being able to hold it together. I mean, because the stories, I mean, there's not a dry eye in the house when those stories are told. And I mean, it just, if you weren't already if you didn't already have a soft spot, for the house, you will after. But we have so many different, events, and we meet folks, and I think, again, it's the strength of our board and our advisory committee. We have a lot of volunteers that work on the advisory committee. They are not on the board, but they focus more on the actual events. And then the board pitches in and actually runs a couple of events, the clay shoot out in Bradford County being another one. That has grown. I think we had over 400 shooters at that event. Much different demographic than what we have at the Red Shoe Affair, for instance. And yet I see those folks and interact with them out on the course. And their stories and their support and their passion. And some of them, when they came the first time, they didn't really know much about, they just came because it was a clay shoot. Somebody invited them to come to the clay shoot, but then they hear the stories, they see the video.
What it's about.
And then now they're not only coming back, but they're coming back and they understand the mission and they've shared it with others. That's how that event has gone from, 50 shooters to 400 shooters.
Wow.
And our friends out at Sportsman's Park are fantastic, but there is no way you can put more people on a course in one day. So Mr. Potapow on our board, Mike, he runs that clay shoot, and he is as competitive a person as you're ever going to meet. So our event first became maybe the biggest event in Florida, and then it became the biggest event in the Southeast region. Well, he wanted it to be the biggest Ronald McDonald House clay shoot in the country. And I think we're there. I think the only way we could get bigger is if we go to a 2-day event, and that would really tax our volunteers. That would be tough.
And a lot of volunteers volunteer for more than one charity too.
Right.
That's I've noticed that in many communities. And here, I mean, you have Tyler's Hope just came to my mind too, and what another great charity, and the things.
Rick Staub, yeah.
What an incredible community this is, because we mentioned too, there's dozens of, and the people just support them on and on. Shift gears, right? You brought it up, and we wanted to talk about this last time. Your great uncle had a little bit to do with the founding of McDonald's. In a short version, tell us about your great uncle through your eyes and who he was.
So my grandmother is Lorraine Kroc. Her brother, Ray, is, he's who created the McDonald's that exists today. So he bought out the McDonald's brothers, and in short version, I think if you've certainly folks have watched the movie The Founder, if you haven't, go watch it. It's a very entertaining movie, and for the most part really accurate. The one piece that maybe isn't so accurate is those that think he stole, or somehow took McDonald's away from them. They got paid generously, very generously. Yeah.
And a point about that you made last time that I do want to make that point. They got paid what they wanted to get paid. Yeah. It wasn't like that was offered to them. They had a number in their mind that they, after taxes, after this, that they wanted to walk away from.
And so
he met that, right?
Yeah. So when he went and visited them in 1956, 57, and think about it, at this point, as far as he knew, they had one restaurant, this drive-in restaurant in San Bernardino, California, maybe 1,000 square feet, right? Selling burgers. Basically, you're buying a meal for less than $1. Yeah. So you think your average sale is $1, right? And when Ray asked them, he said, "I want to franchise your operation. You don't have to do anything. Just pay me for finding new people, and I want." And he said, "No, we've tried that. It didn't work." And he said, "We have this house right here. See that house on the hill? That's where we live. And one day we'll sell our restaurant. We'd like to get $1 million each, and we'll be good."
That's it.
But think about that. Yeah. This is the 50s.
Yeah, 1956.
And somebody told you today that they own a little hamburger stand and that they want to sell it and get $2 million because there's two brothers.
In today's
you'd be laughing at that, right? So Ray Kroc paid them $1 million after taxes each, about 6 years later, right? Once he realized that he had found an unbelievable opportunity, and he was growing it and needed to keep growing it.
Another key point that you mentioned in there, and we talk about leadership and vision, and we talked earlier about Jimmy Buffett and having this mind that, I mean, who saw, old folks' homes that are parrot head, homes, right? You have to be a different mindset to see that. But one of the things that you mentioned last time was that they had tried to franchise the brothers like 9 stores, and they didn't work. And you had told me at that time that one of the reasons it didn't work is because they couldn't get their vision to those 9 stores because they were still working in the business.
I saw your interview, your podcast with Mitch Glazer, and I know Mitch well. We serve on the Alachua Chamber Board together, and my office is in Tech City. It's Mitch's place. And Mitch was talking about that he looked at it differently. He thinks absentee ownership can work, and it's worked. He's made it work in some of his businesses. I just think in the restaurant business, it's different, especially those two. And the Founder movie, I think, really is accurate. They were so particular about their process, their efficiency, the speedy service system that they created. They were very hands-on owners. They were present. You can't recreate that.
No.
You can't. You're just not going to find people that have that same passion and drive. And so for them, what they wanted to recreate what they had, and unless one of the brothers went
to that
and stayed there, I just think that's where that's the difference.
And it's tough to sprinkle that out amongst a lot of individuals. You were talking about the process driven, which we deal with that in our business a lot. And I see it in leadership all the time, that they were concerned about the process, which is vitally important. That's the chemistry of how to make that burger. And like you were telling me that the meat's got to sit right in the middle of the bun, and the 2 pickles are on in a certain way.
Right.
That is vitally important to build your brand. On the other side, you still need those individuals that had the charisma and the charismatic way about them to get out and let people know about it. And it's not always the process-driven person. The analytical one, they come to the Dale Carnegie class to gain some confidence in their communication skills. That's a difficult thing. So Ray was more of that charismatic person, the visionary.
But he so believed in their system. You're talking about this. Ray Kroc had 0 food service. His closest thing to food service experience was that he was selling shake multi-mixers to restaurants and paper cups in his prior career.
And he was like in his 50s at that time, right?
52 when he met the McDonald's brothers. He was 52.
52 years old.
Yeah. So but I think he was more passionate about the way they ran the San Bernardino store. He was more passionate about replicating that than they were. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
That he didn't open a store where he wasn't present, working with that owner to correct them and to say, no, we don't do it that way. It has to be done this way, and here's why. And and I think the McDonald's brothers were extremely diligent about store number 1, but the stores that were out and about, I think that's why they weren't successful. Plus, I mean, you're talking about the number 1 store. Maybe you're never going to get a store that's going to be as good as that. Right place at the right time, But Kroc went to those early franchisees. He made some mistakes. He hired some friends, or the franchisees came from his country club, and these guys had side businesses and so on and so forth, and they weren't focused. He changed his strategy on who he was looking for, and the movie depicts it very accurately. He found couples where the husband and the wife really wanted to own their own business, and were passionate about McDonald's being their life, and
the whole world. Yeah.
And those folks were present in their stores, and I really think, again, you go back and look at it. How could Ray Kroc be more passionate about the McDonald's standards than the McDonald's brothers? And it was about spreading it beyond store number 1.
And when you stand back and observe, sometimes when you're in the ring fighting, you don't know exactly. You're doing the right things. You're ducking and punching at the right time. Yet for you to teach somebody else to do that is very difficult. I mean, very, very few of the great boxing coaches were boxers themselves. You know, they observed it. They saw what was going on, and that's what I see Ray Kroc is doing, is standing on the outside saying, wow, now we can take what you two are doing and do it here, 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 and we have something. How did I'll put it this way, how did his sister and her husband, who happened to be your grandmother and grandfather, how did they get involved, and what was that chemistry like?
So my grandpa and my grandma bought the franchise directly from Ray early on, one of the first 100 stores, and my grandpa was looking for a career post craft foods in Chicago. He was an accountant and handled taxes, and Kraft had been acquired somebody else, and so they were going to have a bigger operation, and they wanted to move my grandpa to New York to run state and local taxes for the whole company. And he didn't want to leave Chicago and go to New York. So he said, I got to find something. So he and my Uncle Ray did not get along particularly well, just personal stuff. And as I got older, I remember asking him about that. How do you go into business with your brother-in-law? Going into business with family can be difficult to begin with. Well, and then not necessarily trusting him, but he really believed the McDonald's business was philosophy. Going to be phenomenal. And they opened a store in West Lafayette, chose that store location only because my mom was going to Purdue. She was a freshman at Purdue University. And my mom met my dad. My dad was a student working at Purdue. So my dad was the first, one of my first managers for my grandpa. And then my mom's two sisters' husbands, they became managers.
So it was your mom's
yes
family.
Yep.
So I've got to go. Ray Kroc started his involvement with the McDonald's brothers at 52. Was his sister a younger or older sister?
My grandma's the youngest of the three kids. So my Uncle Ray, Uncle Bob, who was a brilliant scientist. And so you look at Ray and Uncle Bob, a doctor, and Ray, who didn't finish high school. My grandma is very bright.
So what was the age difference between?
I think my grandma was 8 years younger. Yeah.
And the point I want to make is that your grandpa, her husband, it wasn't the McDonald's thing that they had known each other for a long time.
Yeah. Yes.
They had been brother-in-laws for a long time. So that erosion of relationship happened prior to.
Yes. Ray had, again, the movie depicts it accurately, where he had a lot of just inventions and different things that he would try to market and he'd push on his friends. And my grandpa is one of those people that would not have a hard time saying no. My grandpa would say, that's stupid. He's
an accountant.
So yeah.
He's very analytical. Yeah. Ray's a salesman.
Yeah. So my grandpa looked at him as kind of shifty and slick. And so as I got older, I remember asking him that, and he said the business was good enough for me to not worry about that. But not even a year after their store opened in West Lafayette, there was maybe 80 to 100 stores operating. The West Lafayette store was number one store in the company. I have some really cool stuff that I get from McDonald's. My mom or my grandma had given it to me just because I'm the oldest and I'm McDonald's nut. And it's a set of dictaphone tapes, conversations between the McDonald's brothers and Ray that they would record and then send to each other.
Wow.
And there's a transcript, thankfully, so I don't have to play the tapes, but I'm reading through the transcripts when the different stores would come online, and Ray's bragging to the McDonald's brothers about these stores, and he said, yeah, my sister and her husband, Hank Grow, had opened a store in West Lafayette, and it's the number one store in the company. So
volume-wise?
Volume-wise. Okay. So they're not even a year in, and the Wabash River in West Lafayette floods the whole levee floods the store. My grandparents had sunk everything they had into that store.
Wow.
Everything. So they called, so they lost everything, all the heating and cooling equipment in the basement, and stock that was in the basement. They had to close for 2 weeks. It's the number one store, so now you got no revenue, right? So he called Ray and asked for a loan. And Ray said, I'll buy the store back from you, but I'm not loaning you the money. And my grandpa said, we're the number one store in the company. You know we're good for this. And he's trying to make it a business argument, not this is your sister. And Ray said, no, I'm not going to loan you any money, but I'll buy the store back from you. It was almost like he was mad that my grandpa had a successful store.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And like, man, I wouldn't have given him that store if I would have known it was going to be that.
You didn't give it to him.
Right.
He bought that from you and built it.
So my grandpa and my grandma and grandpa, my dad, my mom and her two sisters and their husbands ran that store by themselves for 2 years, 3 years. And
no employees.
Students came in and helped for the lunch rush and the
Okay.
dinner rush, but that's it. Otherwise,
So they
lived in that store until they got it back. My grandpa had a interest-only loan. He had a bank that had given him the ability to pay just interest on his loan, which he did, and they found a way to survive. And the store, once it opened, went right back to being the number one store in the company. And not only did he pay off his loan, he paid it completely off in 3 years, but never a dime from McDonald's, never a dime from Ray. So an already fractured relationship
got more fractured. So was Ray smart enough as a leader to be able to push that button and know that Hank, your grandpa, needed to have somebody tell him that to really get the intestinal fortitude up?
My grandpa was driven. He was driven. He was going to make it work, and he had a great crew. They had a great. I mean, our family, if you got together on that side of the family, everybody worked at McDonald's. So, my point is, my grandpa was going to find a way to make it work. He would have found the money if he didn't have it through a loan. He would have found the money somehow. But the store became so successful that they then opened another store up on campus at Purdue, which is still there, 605 Stadium Avenue. And then my dad opened the first McDonald's in Lafayette, Indiana, which was across the river. And the store on campus was crazy. I mean, we had to block the doors open on game weekends, and I'd go in and clean tables and wrap sandwiches. I couldn't go in the kitchen, but they would. I could take out trash. I could do anything. I just loved being around it, and so that's how my family got involved. My dad got sick, had a heart attack, unfortunately, shortly after he opened his store, and my grandpa had already started to pull out. My dad had bought the original store from them, so my grandpa didn't want to come back in. My dad wasn't healthy enough to expand. McDonald's knows that market's good. They want like 7 stores. My dad's like, I'm sick and on 3 stores. I'm not building more stores. So they made the decision to sell the West Lafayette market to McDonald's. And my grandpa told me that story a million times.
So McDonald's basically, was it still at that time Ray Kroc?
Yeah. So Ray was still involved, but it was a much bigger.
What was Joan like?
So Joan was.
That was Ray's wife.
Yeah.
Joan
So his third wife, right? The movie
who ended up with the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, Joan Kroc. When before she died, she was one of the richest women in the United States. I mean, when Ray died. And we did inherit some money. Us kids, the grandnieces and nephews, we all got our own checks, and my grandma and my mom and her 2 sisters, of course. But all the stock went to Joan. And so when Ray died, I remember my parents telling me he was worth $250 million, which that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But Joan gave away upon her death $1.5 billion
Wow.
just to the Salvation Army. It was at that time the biggest gift by an individual ever in history. The Salvation Army had to meet corporately to decide if they could even accept it, because it was going to. There were some requirements.
That's quite a while ago, too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been gone quite a while now.
She gave, $600 million to the Ronald McDonald House. She gave millions and millions of dollars to social charities in the San Diego area where she lived. She gave the largest gift ever to NPR. So you'll still hear her when they run a newscast that alternates, but you'll hear them say this is due to the Joan Kroc Trust.
That's amazing.
The estate of Joan Kroc, I believe it said. So the stock continued to grow, and in the end, I mean, the vast majority of the McDonald's fortune went to charity. It did not go to her heirs. Ray and Joan did not have any children between them. So my mom is the oldest living blood relative, and I'm next. So it's an incredible story. Her children, I'm sure, did fine, but my point is far more of that money went to charity than it went to.
What was her relationship like with your mom's family after Ray passed?
So as much as my dad or my grandpa and Uncle Ray did not get along, my mom or my grandma and Ethel, Ray's first wife, were like sisters.
Okay.
So she did not like Joan. So Joan and my grandma did not get along any better than Grandpa and Ray.
Yeah.
But since Grandma's family, Grandma, had to make that work. But
and that's understandable too. That first one is, you're at the same age, you're similar, you're coming into adulthood, and down the road it gets complicated.
Yeah, but Joan was a unbelievable philanthropist, and as Ray got older, she took over the charity side. She wanted to make sure she was a smart businesswoman, and when Ray died, she wanted to make sure she had control of the charities, because she wanted to control how that money was distributed. So you saw the charities, because my Uncle Bob, Ray's brother, the
scientist,
he ran the charities, and back then muscular dystrophy and the Ronald McDonald House, when that started in Philadelphia, became really the focus. And when Joan took over, you saw then more social charities and different. My Uncle Ray was an alcoholic, and so she wanted to have education in regards to alcoholism and things like that. There were, and hey, it's her money. She did with it what she wanted. But the gift to Notre Dame, she gave $50 million to Notre Dame, and they built a Peace Institute, which still exists.
Now they give that to a quarterback.
Yeah, you're right. But Uncle Ray, if you read Grinding It Out, where he talks about, he says, there one place I'll never give money is to a university, because he didn't graduate from high school, and so his feeling was a college degree that's meaningless. I just want somebody that works, And at McDonald's, I remember asking my dad that one time, or my grandpa, or maybe both. I said, so you would really, if you've got a great worker, you don't want them to go to college. And they're like, well, I mean, we wouldn't discourage them from going to college, but yeah, if they're a really good worker, we'll make them an offer to stay.
We have 8 seconds. One sentence about wrapping up leadership from what you learned from McDonald's.
Career development and fun.
Awesome.
For me.
That is great. Ed, like always, man.
My pleasure.
I absolutely love this. I wish it was 2 hours long. Zach, one day we just got to keep going. We have to do that, because the two of us could talk forever about this. Coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, inside the Coach's Podcast Room. This has been Motivation U, the podcast.